Have you ever tried sewing with an overcast foot? Not only is it perfect for sewing along the edge of fabric, it can also be used for a few other handy little tricks too.
Hi, I'm Linda.
The overcast foot is one of my favourite and most used presser feet, so I'm excited to show you how it actually works. Let me show you how to sew easily over the edge of fabric to stop it fraying, as well as how to use it to hold fabric layers together to make binding easier.
Did you know?
You can also use it to make a narrow hem or lettuce hem. You can even make pintucks or use it as a top stitch guide too, so I'll show you all of that as well.
Useful, huh?
Let's start off with the most common use for this foot, sewing over the edge of fabric without the need for a serger or overlocker. Maybe you're wondering why I don't just use a regular presser foot to do it.
Shall I show you?
What happens when I try and sew over the edge of this cotton with a regular presser foot? See how the thread tugs at the edge? It pulls it out of shape, so I'm ending up with a pretty wobbly finish. The machine also looks more tempted to eat my fabric. Can you see how it's trying to drag the edge down into the machine? It's even worse with stretchy and delicate fabrics. Now let's swap over to the overcast foot so you can see the difference. It's usually a snap-on foot, so it's super easy to just clip it on and off the sewing machine. At the front of the foot there's a little guide to line the fabric edge up against. In the middle of the foot is a bar, but be careful here because that bar is right in the stitching area, so make sure that you pick a wide enough zigzag or overcast stitch so the needle lands clearly on either side of it. I've snapped a needle or two in my time with this foot, so take it from me, it's worth checking that stitch you selected definitely clears the bar before you start sewing. Can you see how the stitches form right around that central bar? It's keeping the thread tension just right. No pulling, no distortion, just lovely even stitching. The fabric stays flat and the edge looks beautifully straight after.
Let's see that again, but slowed right down.
With the regular foot, you can see that fabric being pulled all over the place. The thread is tugging and twisting at it, giving me this edge as a result. But here, that over edge stitch is forming right on the bar, wrapping it around, then just slipping off the back of the bar into that perfect spot on the fabric edge like magic. With a crisper edge to match, and you can see how much flatter it sits too. I usually like to start sewing with a couple of stitches forward and a couple backwards to lock in the first few stitches so they can't pull out easily. With this foot I need to be careful not to go back too much. Too many stitches on top of that centre bar cluster together and that thread can then get jammed where there isn't enough room for a pile of stitches to be able to slide off together. For the stitch length I tend to go with around 2 to 2.5 millimetres. That's close enough together to catch any loose threads that might want to fray away, but not so small that the stitches bunch up and risk puckering the fabric, which can happen more when the stitch length goes under about 1 millimetre. Although if I want a denser stitch to finish the edge with, I'd sew my usual stitch length first to hold that fabric in position, then sew a shorter stitch length over the top. Keeping a slow and steady pace helps to keep the stitches forming closely together and evenly on the bar. I can make that even thicker by passing over it again.
Shall I show you?
How I use it to secure fabric layers together before binding. It's a great little hack for quilted projects. Once all the layers are quilted together and the edges are trimmed even, I whip around with the overcast foot just like before. That zigzag stitch fixes all the fabric edges together and also it compresses the edge a little bit. So with less bulk and no fabric edges to shift, wrapping it with bias binding afterwards is a breeze. Have you ever seen those floaty wavy edges on some stretchy tops and skirts? That's a lettuce hem and it's easier than you'd think with this foot.
Do you want to see
how I do it? I shorten the stitch length to around 1.5 millimetres because now I want to distort the fabric edge on purpose. Then, as I sew my zigzag stitch over the edge, I gently stretch the fabric with both hands. See how I've got one in front and one behind the foot? Not too hard, just enough stretch to make that pretty little ripple. The zigzag holds the stretched edge in position, while the rest of the fabric pings back into its regular shape, which is what makes that cute ruffled lettuce effect.
Isn't that fab?
I look for stretch fabrics that naturally want to curl up at the edge like jersey knit when I'm looking to make bolder frills, and I always sew along the edge with the biggest direction of stretch. It's worth playing with other stretch fabrics, but any that don't curl will come out as more of a subtle wave instead. Now what about when you need to sew a really narrow hem but you can't find your old hem foot? Well, the overcast foot has got you covered for that too. The finished effect isn't quite as pro-looking, but it'll do the trick in a pinch. To do it, I fold the tiniest bit of fabric over the edge and finger press it in place. With the fold right up against that edge guide, I can sew a zigzag stitch right over the fabric edge to secure it down. You can keep it all underneath the foot, but I find it easier to lift it up and wrap it around the centre bar and guide it over the top like that. But sewing with it looped over the top only works with thinner fabrics like this cotton. If the fabric's too bulky, it can get stuck inside the foot. If I want that raw edge hidden, I can just fold it once more and switch to a straight stitch with the needle in the left position. Then all I need to do is keep that fold lined up with the guide as I stitch over it, then that raw edge is tucked up inside, giving me this edge as a result. Do you want to sew pintucks but don't have a special foot for it?
Problem solved.
You can use this foot again. I fold my fabric wrong sides together along where I want that tuck to go. A quick hot press makes it easier to get a really crisp and straight looking tuck. With a straight stitch selected in that left needle position again, I sew right along that folded edge, letting the guide keep the fabric at a perfectly consistent distance away. Unfold it after and there's a bold little tuck. Add some more all the same distance apart and you've got a really fun textured effect.
Pretty easy, right? Just the top
Stitch to show you now. I love this for narrow bag handles when it's long, straight and, well, pretty obvious when it's wobbly. I hot press the strap flat first, then I've got my needle in that left position with a straight stitch selected again, but this time I've got the strap edge up against the fabric guide. It keeps my stitching just a couple of millimetres away, so now I have a perfectly consistent stitch happening right next to the edge, which looks really smart.
I hope you'll want to give it a go too, and if you do, don't forget to let me know how it goes. I've got plenty more sewing fun planned, so I hope I'll see you again soon. Bye now.